Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is George Herrera with the New York home teams at Keller Williams Realty. In today's video, I wanted to go over a recent post that I came across on Instagram from the user. It's at budgetdog_. So this is a CPA that I follow that he always gives good financial advice. And one of the things he recently posted was advice for potential home buyers, people who are thinking of buying within the next year or so. He gave some buying tips, and I agree with most of them. So I wanted to actually go through them line by line and just give you my insight and if I have anything to add to it, specifically for New York City. All right. So what he said in the post was, nobody can afford to buy a home. Interest rates are too high. Inventory is still extremely low. Here's your guide to winning in the housing market for this coming year. So one of the first things he said, pre-purchase prep, save 20% down. To avoid PMI, get better rates, and start with equity, save 20%. So in New York City, I mean, the saving the 20% is not actually, it's not necessary, because you can put as little as 3.5% down. It does avoid PMI, private mortgage insurance. So if you put less than 20% down, you'll usually have PMI that you pay, and that's just a separate amount that you pay, like an insurance part towards your payment that makes it a little higher. But I think even if you have 3.5% down, that's fine, because you can get approved. Look for a 2-family, 3-family. Rental income can offset your mortgage payment too. So the 20% down, I would say, save 3.5% down and then see what things look like for you. 20% is if you want to avoid PMI. Second thing he says is get pre-approved. We definitely agree with this. So he says get pre-approved, not pre-qualified. Know your exact buying power and use it as leverage. So a pre-approval is when you submit all your financial documents to a lender for a formal pre-approval. Pre-qualification, or pre-qual, is all verbal. So that's like if you talk to a lender, they just ask you some questions about your income, your credit, your job history, stuff like that, and they give you a pre-qualification. But it's not the formal one because you didn't submit your documentation. So that one totally we agree with. Next one, build a 3-month emergency fund, because being house poor with no safety net is the fastest way to ruin your finances. That's totally true. Especially here in New York City. These are older houses. If it's a co-op or condo, I guess that it could be different, but a 3-month emergency fund is not a bad idea either way, which means 3 months of your living expenses or 3 months of your salary, let's say, in a separate savings account. That's just for emergency. So that's an emergency fund. But when you do buy a property, if you buy a residential property, things pop up all the time. And you don't want to use all your funds on the down payment, closing costs, and then something breaks or you have some issue in the house and you're having to take out loans or things like that. So an emergency fund, a 3-month fund, is a good expense, a good idea. So next thing, buying strategies that he lists. One is house hacking. Rent out rooms or ADU to speed up the payoff. Here in New York City, what that would be, the ultimate house hack, is the 2-family and the 3-family. So you buy a 2-family, 3-family, 4-family, whatever the case is. One of those units is your primary residence. The other units are rental units, and that rental income helps to offset your mortgage. So in our opinion, this is what we advise a lot of our team and a lot of first-time buyers is, if they're okay with it, if they're willing to be a landlord, then yes, buying a 2-family or 3-family, it does make a lot of sense, because the rental income does offset a lot of your mortgage expense, and that can help you towards saving for one day getting a single family home or towards the next property or next investment property. So house hacking, definitely something to think about. Number 5 he has is off-season purchasing. Buying during winter months can easily save you 5 to 10%. I don't know how true that is here in New York City. They don't really go down like that. We don't see a big drop off in demand like that in the winter, but in the winter, there are less buyers actively looking, so you do have less competition. If you buy in the spring and summer months, then you most likely, usually, you'll have more competition. There's just more people looking. So you might be competing against more people. If you like the idea of having less competition, more negotiating leverage, then buying in the colder months does make sense. It does give you a little bit of that. Number 6 he has here is buy 25% below your max approval amount. Just because you qualify for $500,000 doesn't mean you should spend it. I mean, that's a good rule of thumb if you want to be conservative and not stretch yourself too much. Let's say you get pre-approved for a purchase price of $800,000, then you could bring it down 25%. Why not? You could actually bring it down and shop below your approval amount just to be safe. So that's something to think about for sure. Number 7 he has his rate locking strategy. Pay for longer rate locks when the market is volatile. And this is smart because especially in New York City, deals take a while to close. And here on average, once you go into contract, it can easily take 2 to 3 months before you're actually ready to close. And a typical rate lock, you might lock your rate for 30 days. If that expires, you have to pay to extend it every week or 2 weeks after that. So if you have to do a 2-week extension, you have to pay. And then if that 2 weeks comes up and the deal's not ready to close, you have to pay again to extend it again. It can get very expensive, especially because the prices and the loan amounts here are very high. So longer rate lock periods definitely give you some peace of mind, and it gives you some cushion because deals do take a while to close here. So definitely rate locking strategy is a good one. Number 8 he has is use local credit unions. They almost always offer better rates than big banks. I'm not so sure how true that is here. We don't have a lot of local credit unions, and a lot of the people that we see get really low rates are actually, they're all across the board, using mortgage brokers, mortgage lenders, big banks, small banks. So I don't really think that one here in New York City doesn't apply so much. But definitely if you have a local credit union nearby, you can always check and see what rates they're offering and compare. Number 9 he has is get seller concessions. If you can't negotiate on price, discuss closing costs, repairs, and rate buy downs. Repairs are not common here. Most sellers don't really do repairs. It's usually handled in price. But closing costs and rate buy downs, that is definitely something you can think about. So you can always ask for a seller concession. Let's say you're negotiating. If you're up against other buyers, then it's hard to really ask for seller concessions. That's normally, in certain areas, seller concessions are more common. And also if you're the only offer on the table that's negotiating, then you have some more leverage to ask for seller concessions. And the concessions can be used, the concession can be used to pay for your closing costs or part of your closing costs. So definitely something to keep in mind. And then rate buy downs, definitely if you're not getting anywhere on price and you still want to negotiate, negotiating a rate buy down is a good strategy. That's where the seller agrees to pay a certain amount of points towards buying your rate down. So you can negotiate that too. And then also the seller concessions is another negotiation strategy. Next thing he has here, payoff methods. All right. So once you close, some of the methods you can use is making bi-weekly payments instead of paying every month. You pay every 2 weeks. That usually gives you about 1 extra payment per year. And that can save you probably about 4 years. You might actually pay it off. I believe it's like 4 to 6 years earlier than if it's a 30-year loan, you probably pay it off around 4 to 6 years earlier. You pay a lot less in interest. So that's one method. Round up your payments. So let's say your mortgage payment is $42.19. You just round it up to $42.50 or round it up to $4,300. That little roundup, the amount additional going to principal, it makes a big difference over time, and you end up paying a lot less interest over time. So that's another strategy. Something else, payment to balance. Once you pay off debt, redirect payments to mortgage principal. So let's say you have credit card debt or other personal debt or installment loans. Once you pay those off, the idea is that since you've been paying it, keep that payment going, but make that payment towards your principal on your mortgage. And again, that can just speed you up on the payoff date. So you end up paying your loan off a lot earlier than you normally would. And then, so then he has also on here, accelerated payoff, front loading, pay more principal early when interest portion is highest. So if you just closed, that's when you want to be making those additional principal payments as much as possible. It ends up saving a lot of interest over the many years that you have on the loan. Then he mentions here in refinancing a good rule of thumb. Refinance only if rates drop at least 1 percentage point below what you have. So let's say you locked in at 6.5. You really wouldn't want to consider refinancing unless the current mortgage rate is 5.5 or lower, because that's when it makes sense. You have to remember that when you refinance, you have closing costs again. So those closing costs, they usually get built into the refinance anyway, but the savings on your new loan when you refinance, you want to make sure it makes sense. And if it's less than a percentage point, it takes you a long time to recoup the savings, to recoup the closing costs. So if it's 1 percentage point or more, the difference, then the savings are bigger and you actually recoup the closing costs sooner. And that way, once you get past that, once you recoup the closing costs and the savings, then everything after that, you're just at a lower rate. So something to keep in mind, 1 percentage point or more from what you have is when you want to consider refinancing. So the other thing is to red flags to avoid that he mentions, which I think are good, are avoid adjustable rates. So those are the ARM loans, adjustable rate mortgage. Those will be, the terminology is like a 5-1 ARM, 7-1 ARM, 10-1 ARM. So that's where it's fixed for 5 years and then it goes variable after that. Or a 10-1 ARM, you have a fixed rate for 10 years and then it goes variable after that. So those, if you're planning to refinance anyway, let's say if you do a 5-1 ARM and you plan to refinance within the next 5 years, then it can work. But it's always risky because once you get past the fixed rate for whatever reason, if you get to that point after the fixed rate period, it goes variable and then your payments can go up significantly. So, it's always, you got to be careful with the adjustable rate mortgages. The other red flag to avoid, never do a cash out refi. There are people who do cash out refinances. Pretty much when you refinance, take equity from your house, take cash, and then it increases your loan amount. So I personally don't like the idea of cash out refis, but there are people who do it and then they even use it as an investing strategy, like the BRRRR method, where you'll buy, rent, rehab, refinance, and then repeat the whole thing. So some people do take equity and then they buy another property. But red flag to avoid, don't never cash out refi. He mentions, and then avoid 30-year mortgages. This one I don't really agree with. Most loans are 30-year mortgages, and if you do less than that, the payments can be a lot higher. So in my opinion, the 30 years makes sense. You get the lower payment that you can if you have the means, and if you're able to, by all means, do a shorter loan period. Another red flag to avoid, he mentions, is never buy with less than 10% down. That one, in my opinion, it's all about your numbers, your income, your budget. You just got to run your numbers. I don't necessarily agree with that because it all comes down to what you're comfortable with monthly. You just got to run your numbers. And if you're buying a 2-family or a 3-family with 5% down and the rents are good and the rents that offset your mortgage make it very affordable for you, then it totally makes sense. So it's more about running numbers as opposed to the down payment. And then the last one he has here is never buy more house for the investment. So never buy more house than you can afford is probably what he means here. And that again goes down to the budgeting. Just make sure you run your numbers, make sure you're conservative. Taxes go up every year, insurance goes up every year, houses have issues, things happen. So you definitely want to be conservative when you're running your numbers, and you don't want to end up being house rich and cash poor. So you want to make sure you are comfortable with the monthly payment that you take on when you buy a property. So I hope that helps. I thought it was a pretty good post, a pretty good breakdown with some good tips. I'll leave a link to the post in the description in case you want to check it out and in case you want to follow him, because he gives a lot of good financial advice. All right. Thanks as always for tuning in, y'all. If you have any questions, you can reach us on our website, queenshometeam.com/help, and we'd be happy to help in any way possible. Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for the next episode. Take care and have a great day.